Jimi Hendrix stopped playing. He set his guitar down gently. And he said 3 words that would echo for 50 years. The year was 1969. A small backstage room at the Fillmore East in New York City. The kind of room where cigarette smoke hung in the air like fog and the walls absorbed decades of music and ego, and the particular electricity that comes from musicians waiting to go on stage. Jimi had just come off a set. His shirt was open, his afro wild, his fingers still carrying the memory of the strings. He sat on an equipment case, his Stratocaster resting across his lap, talking quietly with his road manager about the next city, the next show, the endless rhythm of touring. The room held maybe 15 people. Band members. Crew. A few people who had backstage passes and the kind of confidence that comes from being adjacent to greatness without having earned it themselves. One of those people was a guitarist named Danny Rourke. 22 years old. Long hair. Bell-bottoms. A Guild guitar slung across his back like a statement. He'd been playing in clubs around Greenwich Village for 2 years, building a reputation as a hotshot, the kind of player who could mimic Clapton's phrasing and had memorized every Hendrix solo note for note. Danny had convinced himself he was good enough to be in that room. Good enough to stand near Jimi Hendrix. Maybe. In the particular delusion that young skill sometimes creates, good enough to challenge him. He'd been drinking. Not drunk, but loosened. The kind of loose where bad ideas feel like courage. Jimi was mid-sentence, explaining something about an amplifier modification to his tech, when Danny interrupted from across the room. "Hey Jimi." The room didn't exactly go quiet. But something shifted. People's attention turned. Jimi looked up, mild curiosity on his face. "Yeah, man?" Danny stood up from where he'd been leaning against the wall. "I've been watching you play for 2 years now. Studied every solo. Every technique." Jimi nodded slowly. "That's cool. I think..." Danny paused, gathering himself. "I think I could play your stuff better than you do." The room went completely silent then. Not the dramatic silence of confrontation. The uncomfortable silence of witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. People looked at their shoes. Someone coughed. Jimmy's road manager started to stand up, but Jimi raised one hand slightly, a gesture so small most people missed it, but it held enough quiet authority to freeze everyone in place. Jimi looked at Danny for a long moment. His expression didn't change. No anger. No insult. Just that calm, measuring look that suggested he was seeing something beyond what Danny thought he was showing. "You think you could play my stuff better than me?" Jimi said. Not a question. A clarification. "Yeah." Danny's voice had gained confidence from Jimmy's lack of reaction. "I mean, no disrespect. But I've put in the work. I know your music inside out." Jimi stood up slowly. He picked up his Stratocaster, holding it by the neck. For a moment, the room held its breath, uncertain what would happen next. In 1969, in a backstage room, a young guitarist challenged Jimi Hendrix. Jimi said nothing. He just smiled, held out his guitar, and said, "Play it then." What happened next has been told for 50 years. Jimi walked across the room toward Danny. His movements were unhurried, almost lazy. He stopped about 3 feet away, close enough that Danny had to look slightly up to meet his eyes. "You want to play my stuff better than me?" Jimmy's voice was quiet, conversational. "Here." He held up the Stratocaster. Danny's hands came up automatically, reaching for the guitar, then stopped halfway. His face showed the first flicker of uncertainty. "What?" "Play it then," Jimi said. Still holding the guitar out. Still smiling that small, knowing smile. "Show me. Show everybody here. Play something I played tonight. Better than I played it." The guitar hung in the air between them like a test that neither of them could walk away from. Danny's hands were frozen. His mouth opened-closed. Around the room, people had stopped pretending not to watch. This was the kind of moment that would be talked about later, the kind of story that got embellished and retold. But right now it was just happening, raw and uncomfortable and real. Danny started. You studied every solo, Jimi said, his voice gentle, not mocking. You know my music inside out. So play. Right here. Right now. Show me what you got. The guitar was still extended. Jimmy's arm didn't waver. Danny looked at the instrument. At Jimmy's calm face. At the 15 people watching. And in that moment, with brutal clarity, he understood what was being offered. Not a guitar. A mirror. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the meaning of this moment is still unfolding. Danny's hands dropped to his sides. I can't, he said, the words barely audible. Jimi lowered the guitar slowly. Why not? Because. Danny's face was red now, but not with anger. With something else. Shame mixed with sudden understanding. Because I don't know your music. I know your notes. That's not the same thing. Jimi nodded once, a small acknowledgement. He didn't say, exactly, or that's right, or anything that would drive the lesson home harder than Danny was already driving it himself. He just nodded. You're good, Jimi said, and it sounded like he meant it. I can tell. You've got fast fingers. Clean technique. You've put in hours. He set his guitar back on the equipment case and turned back to Danny. But here's the thing, man. And I'm telling you this because somebody told me once, and it saved me a lot of wasted time. Jimmy's voice was still quiet, still gentle, but everyone in the room was leaning in to hear. You can learn every note I play. You can memorize every solo. You can copy my gear, my setup, the way I hold my pick. But you can't copy what it feels like to be me when I play those notes. Danny just stood there, his guild guitar still on his back, suddenly feeling like a costume. Music isn't about fingers, Jimi continued. It's about why you're playing. What you're trying to say. Who you are when nobody's watching. The notes are they're just how you get there. But if you don't have anywhere to go, man, the notes are just noise. He picked up his guitar again. Not offering it this time, just holding it. His fingers found the strings naturally, like they belonged nowhere else. You want to be a great guitar player? Jimi asked. Danny nodded, unable to speak. Stop trying to be me. Stop trying to be Clapton or Beck or anybody else. Figure out who Danny is. What Danny has to say that nobody else can say. Because that's the only music worth playing. The music only you can make. Jimi played a single note. Let it sustain. Bent it slowly, the pitch rising and falling like breath. Anybody can play this note, he said. But when I play it, it says something. About me. About what I'm feeling. About what I've lived through. Your note would say something different. Should say something different. Because you're different. He let the note fade into silence. So go find your note, Jimi said. Not mine. Hendrix didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after Jimi stopped speaking. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to be the first person to break whatever had just happened. Danny stood there, his face showing about 17 different emotions at once. Embarrassment, yes. But also something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or the particular exhaustion that comes from having a false version of yourself exposed and discovering that the real version underneath might be worth more. Thank you, Danny said finally, his voice rough. Jimi nodded. You're welcome, man. Then Jimi did something that nobody expected. He walked to the corner of the room where someone had left an acoustic guitar, a beat-up Martin that belonged to one of the crew members. He picked it up, checked the tuning, made a face at how out of tune it was, and spent 30 seconds fixing it. Then he sat back down on the equipment case and started playing. Not one of his songs. Not a famous riff. Just something. A simple chord progression. Slow. Almost meditative. This is what I do when I forget why I'm playing, Jimi said, his fingers moving over the strings. I strip everything away. All the solos, All the showmanship, all the stuff people expect. And I just play something simple. Something true. And I try to remember what it felt like the first time I picked up a guitar. Before I knew who Jimi Hendrix was. He looked up at Danny. Sit down, man. Danny sat on the floor, still holding his guild. Play something, Jimi said. Not my stuff. Not anybody's stuff. Just play what you feel right now. This second. Don't think about whether it's good or whether anybody will like it. Just be honest. Danny's fingers found his strings. He played a few notes. Tentative. Searching. Nothing impressive. Nothing fast. Just simple, uncertain notes that sounded like what they were, someone trying to tell the truth. Jimi kept playing his simple progression underneath, creating space for Danny's notes to exist. They played together like that for maybe 2 minutes. The most famous guitarist in the world and a 22-year-old hotshot from the village, playing something that would never be recorded, would never be remembered for its technical merit, but would stay with everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. When they stopped, Jimi stood up and handed the Martin back to its owner. You've got something, he told Danny. I heard it. Those last few notes. That's yours. That's the thing nobody else has. Build from there. He put his hand on Danny's shoulder briefly, a gesture of connection rather than condescension. And hey, Jimi added, that small smile returning, maybe lay off telling people you can play their stuff better than they can. Even if you think it's true. Especially if you think it's true. The room exhaled. Someone laughed. The tension broke like a fever. Jimi picked up his Stratocaster and headed toward the door. He had another set to play. The audience was waiting. At the door, he turned back. Danny, right? Yeah. Come see me after the next show. I want to hear what you come up with. Then he was gone, walking down the hallway toward the stage, leaving behind a room full of people who had just witnessed something that wasn't quite a fight and wasn't quite a lesson but was somehow more important than either. In that quiet moment, Hendrix did something no one expected. Danny Rourke never became famous. He played in bands around New York for another decade, made a decent living as a session musician, taught guitar to kids in Brooklyn. He never tried to sound like Jimi Hendrix again. But he told the story of that backstage room for the rest of his life. And everyone who heard it remembered the same thing. Jimi Hendrix could have destroyed him. Could have embarrassed him in front of everyone. Could have played something impossible and walked away, leaving Danny's ego in pieces on the floor. Instead, Jimi handed him the guitar and waited. Let Danny discover his own limits. Let Danny teach himself the lesson. Then offered him a path forward that didn't require becoming someone else. That's mastery. Not the notes you can play. The space you create for others to find themselves. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 50 years later, that Stratocaster Jimi held out still exists, in a museum somewhere, behind glass. The guitar Danny Rourke played that night is probably in a pawn shop or someone's closet, forgotten. But the moment between them, the 3 feet of air where the guitar hung suspended, where ego met grace, where one man offered another a chance to be honest, that moment lives forever. Not because of what was played. Because of what was understood. Jimi Hendrix died a year later. Danny Rourke kept playing, but never like Jimi again. He found his own voice. Slow. Honest. His. 30 years later, a journalist found Danny teaching guitar in Brooklyn. Asked him about that night. Danny was quiet for a long moment. Jimi could have crushed me, he said. He had every right. Instead, he handed me his guitar and waited. Let me see myself. Then showed me a way forward. He picked up his guild, the same one from that night, worn now, scarred, beautiful. That's mastery, Danny said. Not proving you're better. Helping someone become who they actually are. The guitar Jimi offered that night sits in a museum. But the space between them, the 3 feet where ego met grace, that space still teaches. Not through notes. Through silence. through the quiet understanding that the greatest players don't need to prove anything. They just hold out the guitar. And wait.